would dress up in saris and talk. No, that's not what happened. That was the original plan. The very first year we met, we had a panel of women, Vaishnavis, who spoke to us about how as men we can better understand how women think, what's important to them. And those, raise your hand if you were here for those sessions, a few of us know, okay? You may recall that the ladies on their own initiative came up with a really great introduction, which was they all put on very dark sunglasses. They marched into the room with the background music of Mission Impossible. For men to try to understand, so Mission Impossible. So we thought it took about 6 years for that learning to settle in, so now we're ready to tackle another topic. So this one we've invited very senior Vaishnavis here to come and explain to us. The topic is how men can succeed in honoring and protecting women. And I'm going to introduce each of them, and then we're going to have each of them speak, kind of looking at the past, a little bit at the present, and then looking forward to how things can be improved. As I mentioned at the end of Rukmini's presentation, he spoke about engaging our talents in Krishna service. That was one of the primary messages he gave us. Many of us may not know that in some places in ISKCON, and in some times in ISKCON, if you were in a woman's body, you were prohibited from engaging your talents in Krishna service. Because you were told you were less capable, or you were told it was closely not possible, or maybe sometimes even people misquoted Srila Prabhupada. And you can just imagine if us, in our male bodies, went to a particular temple and we were told we'd like to do deity worship, or we'd like to cook, or we'd like to have some leadership role, or we'd like to sing, or we'd like to give class, and you were told, Navakishore Prabhu or Thomas Prabhu or Mango, you can't do it because you don't have the right gender body. You're a man, but men are not allowed to do X, men are allowed to do Y, men are not allowed to do Z. How you would feel? Would you feel inspired? So we wanted to kind of bring up this session in terms of, again, introduce the speakers, what the history has been, what example Prabhupada brought up, and are there maybe things we need to address and try to do better? Okay, so that's the theme of this conversation. So let me introduce our three speakers briefly. I'll begin with Rukmini Devi Dasi, who is one of the most intelligent devotees I know, except in your choice of husband. We're not going to talk about that. That's the Praharana Vision team can talk about that. Rukmini Devi Dasi first met devotees of Krishna in San Francisco in the summer of 1968. She was 16. She traveled to Montreal to meet Srila Prabhupada with the three couples on the way to London, right? Mukunda, Janaki, Malati, Guras, Samasundar, and Jamuna. Rukmini was initiated in Montreal at that time. She then served in Boston and New York temples as an artist and then Pujari. In 1972, she was sent by Prabhupada to Mayapur India with a group of other artists to learn the traditional art of putu, or clay doll making. In 1974, the artist returned to the United States, to LA, to create the first American theistic exhibition of Fate, a multimedia museum showcasing Bhagavad Gita, now housed in the ISKCON Temple in LA. Later, she went to Detroit to lead the second one. 1968, we were married. Is Sutari here?
16.
We were married 86. Yeah. It seems like 68 months, so somehow it is. 1986. Sutari and I and his wife, Rangavati, we were part of they used to do these a lot, 3-couple marriage in Denver. I think it's they couldn't afford the key or something. We relocated to Washington, D.C. in 1993. She was really the lead partner of 3 award-winning designer craft galleries named As Kindred Spirits. Their business supported child protection, ISKCON communications, and other social initiatives for 25 years. She completed the mediation and conflict resolution training through ISKCON Resolve and the grief support training through Karuna Care, exhibited here. She has also led several grief support groups online. Since 2017, Rukmini's been speaking, teaching, and leading retreats internationally along with our son, the Kirtan artist Gauravani. She's the founder of the Urban Devi Collective, urbandevi.com, which seeks to uplift the voices of women on the path of bhakti in the 21st century. Let's welcome Rukmini. membership program in 1972 in Toronto. She raised 3 children on her own, worked full-time for 26 years to support her family, and continued to serve this kind of many roles. She's a medical professional, social worker working in the hospital for many years. Professionally, Praharana earned her master's degree in social work and public policy after being a full-time devotee for 16 years. So she went back to college to get those degrees. Had to. She's commenting, had to. We may hear about that. She worked at a large hospital, eventually running a department and acting as an adjunct professor at the University of Toronto. In this country, she serves in Toronto on the board of directors and on the Canadian management team. She has served in North America as director of the Leader Sexual Misconduct Office for 15 years, as a member of the House Division team, and as chair of the North American National Council for 4 years. Internationally, Praharana was director of the GBC Executive Secretary for 7 years, assisting the GBC meeting their goals. She remains a member of the GBC Organizational Development Committee. Let's give Praharana a warm welcome. To her right, Dr. Nancy C. Rothman. Nancy received a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry from Union College and a Master of Science and PhD in Chemistry from Brandeis University. She's been the Division Director of 2 National Environmental Laboratories and is currently the CEO and Principal, thank you. Scientist of New Environment Horizons, Inc., a woman-owned environmental consulting company. Nancy was an appointed member of the New Jersey Science Advisory Board, an active member of the Interstate Technology and Regulatory Council, and served as the Assistant Chemistry Leader for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, NOAA, N-O-A-A. Response to the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. In addition, she has over 42 years of recovery from alcohol and uses her experience, strength, and hope to help others who are struggling in their addictions to change their attitudes and behaviors so they may lead happy and joyous lives. Many of you remember, it was 2 years ago, the whole presentation on addictions. Recently, Nancy completed leading a 12-step workshop for adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families, and has developed a series of videos for Karuna Care, our table over here, about the 12 steps of recovery to encourage people to seek recovery aid in their growth and freedom from various addictions, drugs, alcohol, pornography, food, etc. Over the years, Nancy has counseled many women and men who have faced abusive relationships in their families, work, and communities. She helps these people bravely find their voice to face the issues square on, and then helps them to establish appropriate boundaries to stop the abuse. I will just mention we are recording this. We will hopefully schedule sufficient time for question and answers. So if you bring up a particular question, or if you want to share anything personally, please do what's being recorded. So these things we make available publicly. So for opening remarks, we ask them each to speak about 7 minutes, looking a little bit kind of historically, the first 2 presenters, and then Nancy bringing the professional experience in. Then we're going to come back and talk about where can we go from here, how can we do better, and then hopefully we'll let them have time for question and answer. So we'll start with you.
You might have to have people write down questions and put it on, so people want to write down, I'll stick a paper up.
Yeah. If you have any questions you feel not comfortable asking publicly, we can give them to Dronachari. He's going to raise his hand here, and he'll pass them to me, and then we'll ask those questions. Okay.
Thank you all so much. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the prayers on the piano. Thank you for this there. Sanjeev, did you bring Gauravani?
No, I've just messaged him though.
Oh, my son is doing it. So I came to Krishna consciousness in 1968.
Who can turn the microphone up? Yes. Some local men can do that, or Mark, you okay? Thank you.
I'll speak louder. I came to Krishna consciousness in 1968 in San Francisco. And I have to say that my first experience when I first walked into the temple was that I didn't feel discriminated against or singled out because I was a woman, as was my experience before Krishna consciousness, sort of anywhere and everywhere. But I have to say, I think most women who came to Krishna consciousness later would say that they had a very different experience. At that time, we were all like a family, all serving together without discrimination. Srila Prabhupada himself called everyone, both the boys and the girls, as he referred to us, initiated and uninitiated. Prabhupada called us all Prabhu. So the question on the table here is, what does it mean to protect women? So I'd like to speak a bit about Srila Prabhupada's example. Srila Prabhupada was conservative in his outlook, but he also encouraged each of us as individuals, careful to fan the spark in each of our hearts so that each of us could thrive and offer our unique gifts to Krishna, whether we were women or men. As a great acharya, Srila Prabhupada carried the tradition of bhakti by his predecessor acharyas in succession. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, but we really need to remember that each of them were innovators in their own era, according to time, place, and with the understanding of the needs of their audience at that time. Somebody wants to come in?
She's not allowed because she's a woman.
Right.
Yeah.
So in each generation of the Bhakti tradition, beginning with Lord Chaitanya himself, we see that innovation, reviving tradition according to the current time and necessity. Srila Prabhupada carried tradition and also implemented innovation, and he was criticized for that, even by his own godbrothers. Once during his massage, he told his dear disciple, Shrutakirti Prabhu, that he had become successful because he engaged both the men and the women equally, but that his godbrothers criticized him for that. But he said that those godbrothers did not know how to spread the Krishna consciousness movement. Tamal Krishna Goswami wrote that Srila Prabhupada told him that most of his male disciples would have left if it hadn't been for the magnetic presence of the women in Krishna consciousness. From Tamal Krishna Maharaj. So here's a letter Srila Prabhupada wrote to his disciple Himavati Devi Dasi. Thank you for coming, Gora. So this is a letter Srila Prabhupada wrote in 1969 to Himavati Devi Dasi. He says, I am very glad that you both, husband and wife, are executing the mission of Lord Chaitanya so nicely and faithfully. Personally, I am so much gladdened that the pairs of young boys and girls whom I have placed in householder life are doing so nicely in the Western world. When Lord Chaitanya delivered Jagai and Madhai, he was also householder. But when Jagai and Madhai were actually delivered, his wife Vishnu Priya was not there. But in this case, and in many other cases also, I find that my disciples, combined together, husband and wife, are doing this preaching work so nicely. So I am especially proud how my householder disciples are preaching Lord Chaitanya's mission. This is a new thing in the history of the Sankirtan movement. In India, all the acharyas and their descendants later on acted only from the man's side. Their wives were at home because that is the system from old times, that women are not required to go out. But in Bhagavad Gita, we find that women are also equally competent like the men in the matter of Krishna consciousness movement. Therefore, please carry on these missionary activities and prove it by practical example that there is no bar for anyone in the matter of preaching work for Krishna consciousness. So Srila Prabhupada was not stereotyped. Once in 1968, in his apartment behind the first storefront temple at 26 2nd Avenue, there was a small group of disciples there. And he looked into each one of our faces and he said, I want each one of you to go open a temple somewhere. I was 16 years old at the time, and I was surprised. I said, even the girls? Swamiji, we called him Swamiji at that time. Even the girls? And he was smiling, and he said, yes, there is no difference between the boys and the girls. When you are teaching Krishna consciousness, there is no difference. And he began to speak about Lord Nityananda's wife, Devi, and how she was leading the entire Sankirtan movement after the disappearance of Lord Nityananda. At another time, Srila Prabhupada told his empowered book distributor disciple, Mula Prakriti Devi Dasi, that the women in the Krishna consciousness movement are the secret weapons of Lord Chaitanya. But he was very protective also. I personally know one god sister, when her husband was not taking good care of her or his own spiritual life, Srila Prabhupada said they should be separated. In this case, the husband was not even being abusive, just lax in his practice and not taking good care of his wife. After a year of separation, Srila Prabhupada asked them to try again. There's one sweet story from San Francisco of my god sister, Saradia. We called her Saradia at that time. She was a pretty young 16-year-old who wanted to stay around the temple and do service. Srila Prabhupada told her that she had to finish high school, but she told him that at school the boys were bothering her. Amazingly, Srila Prabhupada told her to give the boys the address of the temple, and then they would come and see Krishna. Isn't that interesting? He didn't tell her that girls don't need to be educated or that she should just go back and serve at the temple. So these are a few thoughts on Srila Prabhupada's example of how he envisioned protecting women. That is, allowing us to shine and flourish according to our individual abilities and gifts given by Lord Krishna. Thank you all so much.
Hare Krishna. My job's a little more difficult. I've been asked to kind of look at some of the samples of abuse, of the really difficult times that not just women face, because when women were mistreated, of course, the whole society suffered. So I'm just going to go through some of these things. You might not even know some of these things. And then there's a few modern day ones that I'd like to tell you. So, number one, because there was such a misconception and misinterpretation of the philosophy, there was a lot of real applaud for, being celibate, being, sannyasi or brahmachari or something. So when someone got married, it was considered a real fall down. A lot of the marriages were arranged, which never goes well, at least usually not. But over the years, children came, and what happened is that a lot of families split up. And what happened? The men were usually lauded as being, she's this. And the women got no support from the temple, no money, no nothing. And usually had to fade away on welfare somewhere. Many damaged families, and the whole second generation of ISKCON, as Gordwani was mentioning this morning, really got totally messed up. And that was a huge loss. Srila Prabhupada would have been extremely disappointed. He would have been heartbroken. So many left. There was polygamy for a while. The Gurukulas, you know the stories. Don't have to talk about that. But do you think that didn't affect women? Also, the families, the women, lived in very austere conditions. I lived with my children in one room, and my husband lived at the temple, getting all the benefits of that. That was pretty common. The men were celebrated, and the women were found at fault for pretty much everything, because the women had all these so-called problems, less intelligent, untrustworthy, overly emotional, manipulative, all that stuff. You've read all that. And we were really made to feel it. At one point in Toronto, we were told we had to leave the temple and go rent a place down the road. This is before we were married, because they just didn't want to see us. This is a Radha Damodar party influence, and it was really nasty. So at that time, we did that, kept doing all the Sankirtan, all the cooking, all the cleaning, everything, sneaking in and out of the temple, hoping not to be seen. Ridiculous. Anyway, that finally went by. I don't know if you know about the Sankirtan parties. How many of you know about those traveling Sankirtan parties of the 70s? Very, very bad. They were women. New Vrindaban was built on the back of these women. They were mistreated terribly. They were not allowed to see their kids most of the time. They were sexually abused. A good friend of mine, Priya, who I love dearly, came back to Toronto, escaped in the middle of the night in fear of her life. She said they weren't even fed properly. They were very abused. And what they did was they collected enough money to build this place. There weren't any big donors, it was the girls. Just so you know. Now they've got the fracking, so things are moving in a better direction. Happens. Anyway, there were other traveling parties. I was on one for a while. Yeah, it was tough. I was lucky. My team, my Sankirtan leader was Devi Swami, who treated us like absolute gold. It was wonderful. But I was lucky. I know the ones from the West Coast were just as abusive. They were really bad, actually. So all the women were good for was collecting money. Just get up and collect money. You don't need to be here at all. And just, be happy that you're being engaged in Krishna service, because after all, you're a woman. Yeah, there were waves. Sometimes things were pretty calm, and then there become waves of this rejection, condemnation of women. At one point, there was a rumor that we should all be put on a boat for Australia. Now when I think back, that wouldn't have been bad, actually. I should have gone. The one who was, the sannyasi who was really pushing that got sent to China, actually, when Prabhupada found out, to try and straighten his head out. So he didn't agree with it, but a lot of these things happened, Prabhupada didn't know. Gurukulas were terrible. Women suffered for that. Facilities in Mayapur, I mean, my gosh, I went in 1977. The men were given the long building. The women were given the roof of the kitchen building with no shelter. And that very night, the whole tarp system we rigged up blew off, and we ended up in the wall buildings being eaten by red ants. And still the men gave us no rooms in the long building, which was not full. That was just one thing. So there's a lot of perception, a lot of problems over the years that have caused so much problems for many, many devotees. But the women have particularly suffered in North America and elsewhere. Really beat up families, beat up kids. Just put to work for I know when I went in Sankirtan, they told me you have to go up to men and you have to pin the flower on them and you have to say, all the handsome men are giving money today to help with feeding children in India. You had to touch the men, you had to put the flower on, you had to flirt. And they taught us how to flirt. Yeah. To me, it made me so sick I would throw up before I go on Sankirtan. It wasn't even Sankirtan. Is he okay?
Good.
Okay. I just wanted, this is just the history, and it's pretty devastating. You could hear many, many stories from many people. I just want to tell you some recent things, very quickly. I don't know if you noticed the Mayapur Samadhi. There were pictures drawn that were supposed to be put in that Samadhi, and they included women, because they were supposed to be pictures of pioneers. There are no women anywhere in that Samadhi. If you look around the top of it, only people playing the dangas, no woman anywhere. Women cease to exist in that situation. Think about that. When I went out and did the pick for my employee, I remember that. The other place I went was Judo Temple. I went there a few years ago. I went up to the front desk with my god sister Dasi. We had both gone out on the streets. I don't know for how long, doing the pick to collect for that property, all of the things that were going on in Judo. At the desk, there was a life member beside me. He was charged 1,500 rupees for his room. I was charged 4,500. I said, hey, you know, I think you should reconsider. No. Oh, no. Then, as we stayed there, we had to stand at the back of the temple room on a little rug, about as big as this. All the women had to stay there. Don't get off the rug. Prabhupada disciples, senior people, didn't matter. We were not allowed to venture in front of the men for fear of agitating their consciousness. Poor things. So that is the norm there, and in other places in India. It's awful. They're not allowed to give classes, not allowed to dance, not allowed to chant. You know, again, they don't exist. So I just wanted to say that, you know, in North America, we're making strides. We're really trying to do better, because if we don't do better, no one's going to come to Krishna consciousness. People in the wider world are not going to be attracted, and already you can see how ISKCON has imploded. I mean, it's wonderful to see all the Indian devotees. Honestly, you've saved us. But where are all of us? They're all gone because it was too much. I have so many god sisters who I'm still friends with who just go, all power to you. They don't want anything to do with it. My kids, my daughters, they said, no, I don't want anything to do with it. Our father was an idiot. The way he treated us, the way he treated you, if that's a man of God, I want nothing to do with it. My son is a little more tolerant. So anyway, that's just to bring you up to speed. And those are very small points, but there's a lot of depth to this, but at least it's giving you a flavor of what we've been through.
Very well.
Hare Krishna, everyone. I hope that you could feel that pain. As I was sitting here, this empathy I have for what preceded me. I've only come into Krishna consciousness in the last 10 years. In the last 10 years, and really my exposure to women in Krishna consciousness really came when I started to get involved with the Bhakti Recovery Group about 4.5 years ago. And in that group, I met 3 women, and then I also met another woman at Devi. But I just want to tell you about current issues, not historical issues. So this one, 2 of the women were initiated by Prabhupada. One woman was initiated and had an arranged marriage, and she was very happy. She was very young. She thought this was the right thing. However, she found right away that her husband was a sex addict and very abusive, and got more and more abusive as she started to resist overtures. And in fact, she would admit that 2 of her children were born out of a consensual arrangement, but that 2 of the children were born from her being raped, and she was very upset. And so she ended up going, and as she would resist more, he would get more and more abusive, and she ended up coming to the temple president and saying, you know, I can't be in this relationship. And she was black and blue and bruised, and they said, of course, we understand. So they were separated. The thing that really troubled her heart and her mind to this day is the fact that within a month, he was married to another woman. No conversation about what had happened to her, and she feels such pain about the fact that she couldn't go up to this woman and tell her, you know, buyer beware, almost. And she said that it was so hard for her, and she's such a powerful woman today. She's left ISKCON. Such a powerful woman today. She said, when I was pregnant, I asked my husband if I could have an orange, and he slapped her. she wasn't allowed to have an orange. And I thought, this woman even asking if she could have an orange and thinking that she had to get his permission? I just couldn't get my head around this. But that's the life she was leading. She also has great shame about the fact that she was forced to send her 4 children off to Gurukul, and her daughter was raped in the Gurukul and will not speak to her to this day. So it's been 40, 50 years later, and she has no relationship. What she's done now is she lives her life, moved towards her grandchildren so she can take care of her grandchildren, but she has left, but has never left Prabhupada. She still chants around, she still reads daily, she keeps the regulative principles, but she doesn't want to be involved with ISKCON because of how damaged she has done. The other woman was married, and the next day she turned up with a black eye and she said, this isn't happening. She was very strong. She was a little older, and they said, okay, you don't have to be married. Now in this case, she in fact felt that the women were forcing her into marriage because she wasn't accepted as being a single woman without being married. So then she got married right away again, and this guy ended up becoming a sannyas like a day later. So he was gone, and she's back to not having anything. The third arranged marriage for her, she was lucky enough to have a beautiful son, but she was never told that her current husband actually had a history. He had been found to have stolen all the temple funds from one temple and then moved to where she lived. And so she woke up one day and he had stolen all of her family money and left her alone with a child, just as you were talking about. And so here she was, and again, maybe you should marry somebody else. And she looked and she said, I can't do this. And then they said, why don't you send your son off to Gurukul? She said, I can't do this either. So she left ISKCON and became a Waldorf teacher and living a happy life. Again, so devoted to Prabhupada, still doing her chanting, still teaching the principles of Krishna consciousness. The other stories are more of women who are younger, much younger, who are feeling the pressure of not living the lifestyle that they're supposed to. Sponsi in Calcutta, who has indicated that the women are really shunning her, almost turning their back on her because she is at the university getting a degree. And they just keep on forcing their children towards her, saying this is the only way for a woman to exist. And she does not think that at some point she wants to have children, but she wants an education, she wants to work, she wants to better herself, but it's somewhat frowned upon. So, it's a difficult situation. And then currently in North America, I have a different friend who is trying to defend women in this temple and has been told, women only should speak when they're spoken to, in fact, has been made to think that she's the one that's at fault, sort of this gaslighting, that if she speaks up about anything, she's the one that has a problem, it's not the other person. And in fact, there's a person that is related to this temple right now that's doing some pretty awful things, and she raised the issue that she didn't feel that this person should be part of the temple, and said, well, we know he's a bad man, but he's a good devotee. Right? So the question is, what is all this about? When I was asked to be on this panel, I will do anything for Rukmini, probably anything. But when she asked me, I said, me? What would you want me to speak about this? But my experience is in damage. A lot of years of talking to people about the damage they suffer because the way we act and what these stories tell me is that this is all based in fear. There's a lot of fear. Fear of losing prestige, fear of not succeeding, fear of being found out. Yes. Fear of not being successful. And in fact, in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, they say fear is an evil encoding thread. The fabric of our lives are shot through with it. So I'm just giving you a perspective because this is not going to be all of our talk is about bashing you guys or ISKCON. So we're going to also be speaking about some solutions that we feel that we can offer, and hope that this will be helpful. Thank you.
So thank you all. So I'm going to make some brief comments and then we'll have our second round here from the three of you and then open up for questions. Some of what we heard certainly is very painful to hear. Just to put things a little bit in context, we are in North America where there's, I think the latest count is 13 temple presidents. A lot of those in the Northeast, not all, but there's quite a few. Women temple presidents. These folks are 3 in Canada. There's 2 GBC members currently globally. They're getting towards retirement age. We don't know what's going to happen after that. And the chair of the North American Executive Committee, NARGB, is a woman. So there's some good signs, but and many of you may be involved in communities where this is a little shocking, or you don't think maybe it happened years and years ago, but as we heard right now, some of these situations are current. One thing we know for sure is you can't solve a problem if you're not able to talk about it. And if you try to ignore that there's an issue physically or emotionally or socially, if you don't bring light to it, then there's no chance of solving it. So that's the main reason we wanted to bring this forward. So we'd be aware of the problems that have existed in the past and the present. Also know Srila Prabhupada's guidance on that. Some of you may be aware in the year 2000, several women senior devotees, Praharana, are you there in my report? I don't think they're in the group. Rukmini, Jamuna, several other senior devotees approached the GBC. Sudharma made the most of the arrangement, spoke in front of the GBC body, explaining some of the things we just heard. At the end of that time, the entire GBC issued a formal apology to the women of our movement, made a statement in the future, we will assure that we provide equal facilities and we take care of the ladies. And still, it's 24 years later and we're still hearing problems exist. If you'd like to look at ISKCON Communications Journal, did I see J or JBS? One of those two published. ICJ. The ISKCON Communications Journal, we can look up the volume there. Published that whole thing, all of the statements that were made, and then the official GBC statement, wherein the GBC apologized and said we're going to make sure it doesn't happen again. And we're here in North America. Ours is a global movement. America's got a lot of problems. Other parts of the world have their problems and that. But it's a fact, historically, most of the social issues that have been addressed by our society started here. This is a part of the world where we put stuff on the table, we try to resolve it, and we set a trend for other parts of the world. We're the first ones to come up with policies on domestic abuse. From there, we went to Mayapur, international headquarters around the world. We talked about it. What's it mean to be a devotee? How do you deal with these types of issues that sometimes pop up? So there are voices in our society today that actively, compared to what we heard here, deny Prabhupada's mood about engaging women, to deny Prabhupada's instructions about providing for women and caring for women, and they continue to minimize women's roles. So we want to talk about, okay, if that's there, what can all of us do? We heard a presentation from Bhutta Bhavana earlier today about circle of concern and circle of influence. So many of us may be thinking, well, I'm very concerned, but what can I do? So individually, maybe you can talk about this, what can we do individually, what we can do as a community, maybe we're in a small temple, large temple, whatever, what can we do to help? What should we watch out for in our own hearts, in our voices, and the tone of our voices, and everything else to minimize this mistreatment, and how can we do better individually and community? That's the question we might be addressed.
So how can we make things better? First of all, we may in our minds idealize Vedic times, but how do we practically engage in bhakti in North America today? Are brahmacharis walking around Manhattan or Toronto wearing tree bark? I haven't seen that. Yeah. Should women be encouraged to jump into the funeral pyre of a deceased husband at the crematorium? Most of you are working professionals, and if you're married, most likely your wife is as well. Many devotees in our communities, both husband and wife, are doctors or IT professionals or research scientists or working in other kinds of professions. It's hard to survive these days with only a single income. Yet sometimes I hear that with both partners working, when they get home at night after both are tired, right? It's the wife who's doing the cooking, the laundry, caring for the kids. Is this kind? Is this fair? Can tasks be shared a bit more equitably? I know one couple, the wife works as a medical doctor. She has to pay the mortgage and all the bills. Of course, she also does all the cooking. Her husband refuses to work or hold any job. He says that doing kirtan is his service to Srila Prabhupada, so he cannot help in any financial way. This is a real story. I didn't make this up. Truth is stranger than fiction, right? What? Right here in America. Yeah? He can't help in any financial way. So is this fair in today's world? How can he justify this attitude? So here are some thoughts from Srila Prabhupada's guru, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, written at this point about 100 years ago. He had such a broad-minded Vaishnava perspective even back then. So this is quite amazing to me. Here's what he wrote in an essay called Relations Between the Sexes in his Harmonist Journal. I don't know if any of you have heard this, but it's quite remarkable. He says, the cardinal principle of Grihastha Ashram is that no one may be the owner of any property or service of another. Everyone is only a servant whose activities are ever in the service of the Lord. Similarly, the sole object of everyone's service as the only master, only friend, only son, and only consort is Krishna. Marrying and giving in marriage do not give rise to any rights of a master, either to the husband or to the wife. Men and women are joined in wedlock for the purpose of serving each other in the performance of the joint service of Krishna. The wife is not an object of enjoyment of the husband, nor vice versa. They do not marry for gratifying their sexual appetites. They marry for pleasing the Lord, not for pleasing themselves. They choose for their partners only such persons who serve God better than themselves. They offer themselves to be accepted by their partners for the favor of being allowed to share in their superior service of Hari. Neither the husband nor the wife should claim the services of his or her husband on their own account. Both of them are only to offer their services if and when their partners please to permit them to share in the service of Hari. None of them can force their partners to serve them. Then he says, the reason why the Guru does not ordinarily ask any person to enter the state of wedlock is that it is very rare to find anyone in this world who is willing to regard his or her wife or husband as worthy of his or her unconditional services. This is, however, exactly the only relationship between the husband and wife that alone can be sanctioned by the Guru. So this is quite an ideal standard, yeah? So then he said, so then that makes me think. So in other words, help with the dishes, take out the trash, do the laundry, take your turn to watch the kids. She is not Superwoman, just as you are not Superman. Love is a verb, an action. It's not a fleeting feeling that sweeps over you or away from you like a spring breeze. We each need to deeply hear each other, to care more carefully, to authentically partner with and companion each other, to be each other's best friend and well-wisher, recognizing each other's needs in a shared relationship. Understand her love language. Get the book, The 5 Languages of Love. If you haven't read it, read it. It's great. This is what it means to build a sacred Vaishnava beloved community without posturing and ego, that I should be served by others. In humble mutual service, we all try to serve each other in love, developing mutual trust in that way. It becomes our joy to love and serve each other in a reciprocation of love. This is the radical personalism that Srila Prabhupada taught and exemplified. Be there when she needs you. She will feel your love and reciprocate and be there for you always, and in your inevitable times of need, in happiness and distress. In one place, Srila Prabhupada said that if someone is Krishna conscious, then whether they are a man or a woman, they can protect themselves. We are each protected by our own sattvic or saintly behavior. Once when Sita Devi was riding in a covered palanquin returning to Ayodhya, the people wanted to see her. So Lord Ram told her to show herself. He said that a woman's protection lays not in a veil or covering, but in her own dharma. Protection means to give shelter to someone you love or cherish or champion, right? As in pro-American, pro-Canadian, right? Protection, right? And the Manusmriti says that gods like to stay in places where women are adored and given respect. The gods don't dwell in places where women are treated badly. And get this, no work will be successful there. If you feel you've done something or said something that didn't go over so well, correct it right then and there. Articulate your mistake and try not to do it again. And if you do it again, beg forgiveness again. To err is human, and to forgive is divine. But forgiveness should not be given or taken cheaply, like some kind of lip service. I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. So I just want to close with this beautiful closing thought from Dear Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. He says, two whole personalities who come together have the opportunity to develop a strong relationship. They are not excessively dominant or dependent, nor do they manipulate each other to shore up their insecurities. Such people do not behave like beggars, looking for someone to rob or perform miracles for them. Even if they ultimately fail to attract a partner, they will not feel lost because they appreciate everything that the Lord has done for them. Instead of trying to acquire something for themselves, they will want to share with others. In such a state, they come to resemble, in their own small way, the reservoir of divinity, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who radiates love to everyone. Beautiful, huh? Bhakti Tirtha Swami. So in conclusion, I would say, what does everyone want? Whether they are a man or a woman, to be seen, to be deeply heard, to be loved and accepted for who they really are, without masks or games. Thank you so much for this chance to share something.
I've been involved in a lot of initiatives in North America and improving many social aspects of our society. I just wanted to mention, before I go into some points that could improve things, I wanted to thank Bhakti Swami. He is one of those ISKCON leaders who has always been a staunch supporter of strong families, of kids, of women. He has no prejudices against anyone and engages everyone according to their service, and that has changed Zone 1 amazingly since he became GBC. It's been a lot of years, but he's been I would not be here today, Maharaj, if it wasn't for you. Okay, what can we do? Now, you're probably leaders, or becoming leaders, or you probably have influence in your communities and temples. So make sure that your leaders, like Bhakti Swami, Zona supervisors, other temple presidents, are doing things that need to be done to strengthen ISKCON. Because if you protect women, if you protect families, you're protecting ISKCON. There's no way around it. So what can you do in your own communities? And how can you encourage your leaders? Number one, protect a woman's right to serve Krishna. Provide her the education, the engagements, according to her propensity and desire. you know how wonderful women are doing so many services. Facilitate them. Give them those opportunities. Let them become better and better. Let them mentor others. This is very important, not only for the temples and communities, it's important for the woman herself. Because everyone wants to give, wants to serve. That's why we're devotee. But if you're told, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, because then it hurts the entire community. So please, please, make sure everybody's got service that they really love to do, that they're enthusiastic about, that makes them feel closer to Krishna and to the devotees. It's devotee care, karuna care, all these things, women are good at that. Get them engaged. Get them doing child protection. Get them doing all kinds of things in your community to strengthen families. Nice couples that you know who have been married a long time, who are doing really well. Get the Greenhouse Division team in. Get them the mentor course. They can become couple mentors. Couples need mentors. There's so many nice programs that we have out there that people don't know about. But when we get our GBC website up, we're going to put these right in. Communications. So, that's one thing. Make sure your women are engaged. Because if you don't, you're losing a lot. Facilitate happy family life. Premarital counseling. In Canada, we said, no fire yoga without premarital counseling. That's it. You can do it online. We have wonderful people through the Greenhouse Division team. If you can't do it online, you can do even a secular course. Something. Absolutely necessary. Mentors, marriage mentors, as I say. Courses, children's services. There are many nice courses. You can see the Karuna Care courses. Greenhouse Division team, Utma and Partha, they have been, I don't know why this is happening. They're traveling all over the world giving courses. In Russia, in Europe, in South America. And I told her, how much are you engaged in North America? Oh, no, we don't get called too much. Why? They're here. They live in Serenogity in British Columbia. They will come and transform your Greenhouse group. They're amazing. So take care of your families. Very important. The temple should be a center of family life. The kids should be protected and happy there. Everyone should feel like it's their place they want to go to be with their friends. Women should be put in leadership positions from the bottom to the top. Women provide a perspective in leadership that sometimes men lack. They have a different way of looking at things. Without women in leadership, you're missing a big piece of very essential management. And their wisdom and their experience and just their, women don't tend to be as into wanting prestige, power, and control. They just want things to be better. Let them do it. Give them positions. They will grow and they will be big helps. And they will become role models for your younger women and men. And when you engage them like that, you end up with a very healthy temple. Now, I don't know how many of you know about the Leader Misconduct Office. It's been around for years. It used to be called the Leader Sexual Misconduct Office. Nobody knows about it? Oh, okay. Okay. I gotta tell you, there are cases. There are serious cases. We started this in North America 15 years ago. There have been really atrocious abuses, mostly of women by men. But now we have a proper way to deal with it. It's like a justice system. We have trained people, devotees, who have training in law, social work, psychology, somewhere where they can understand the situation, can be objective, and they investigate the whole complaint. And then we have others who actually act as judges, senior devotees, who actually restrict the devotee if he's found culpable in many ways. He can be banned from ISKCON, banned from the temple, banned from management, banned from giving class or leading kirtan for so many years, and told he has to get counseling, told he has to give some money to help with counseling of the victims. So this is a very active office now run by Naveen Sharma, who is a lawyer. He was a, I don't know what you call it in the States, some state prosecutor, something like that. What, just prosecutor? Okay. Anyway, yeah. District attorney. In Canada, it's called crown attorney because we have the king. Anyway, so the Leader Misconduct Office is a very essential thing in North America and is being, unfortunately, there's quite a few cases. So men have to understand, I mean, it's not always men, but pretty much. Men have to understand that when they're in a position of leadership, they have power and control over somebody. They cannot use that or manipulate the people that are vulnerable, that are looking to them for guidance. You know, when you think about your guru, you feel, oh, I'll do anything. Well, you can feel that way about a leader, especially if you're a new devotee, especially if you're a young girl. And that's what happens. And they end up in very compromising situations. And then we have to deal with the leaders, and it totally messes up your communities. So don't let it happen. You can learn a lot more about the Leader Misconduct Office. There are brochures, there are, I don't know what else he has going on right now. It will be on the new website as well. This has been going on 15 years, so. Right now we're expanding the office. We're going to include financial abuse, psychological abuse, and physical abuse. We haven't got that all together yet, but we're working on it right now. We have an active committee. The other thing you may not know about is we have a domestic abuse program. We became aware of a lot of domestic abuse going on in our temples. I know because I used to do the counseling in Toronto, and I would sit down with these couples and it was like, wow, okay, these are not devotional kind of ways of living. Anyway, so now there's a policy. It's called Global Policy. The GBC passed it in 2020. But it started in North America. And there's all kinds of information for leaders. There's representatives who can be contacted. So in your temple, if you have a case like this, if you have a problem with domestic abuse, there are people you can get hold of who will help you navigate your way through it. You know, because these people cannot be ignored, and the woman cannot just be automatically blamed, because that's always been what happened. Times have changed. So now there's ways and means for leaders to get help, to get the marriage hopefully back on track if possible. Okay, and so you should get to know about this particular domestic abuse policy and program as well. So these two things are there for your help to make families strong and devotees strong.
I'm an alcoholic. And for a long time, I thought that alcohol was my problem. Until I realized it was actually my solution. Alcohol was not the problem. I didn't understand that. And in fact, often when we have addictions and abuse, it's the solution to what we're feeling, our fears, etc. So if somebody is gambling or has pornography addiction, has an alcohol or drug addiction, and believe it or not, within ashrams there is drugs and alcohol addictions. It's a solution. And we're like, solution to what? Now what's the problem? And I talked a little bit about it earlier, about the fear that exists. And you say, well, I don't have any fear. Well, you know what? They may not understand that you stop drinking. Oh, I stopped drinking. Sorry. That was one of my solutions. 42 years ago, over 42 years ago, I stopped drinking. So it's not a current issue. But the problem is, for me, who I am, if you say, don't touch that hot stove, you're going to get burnt. I might not touch it today. I might not tomorrow, but without help, without a common framework of people to help me, I'm gonna touch that stove. I can guarantee you I'm gonna touch that stove. So I'm here to really tell you about the possibility that within your community, the 12 steps of recovery could actually be a very important tool for you to, engage in. You may not need this, but as I said, the women who came that I knew in the Bhakti Recovery Group came because they wanted to heal not only from the abuse of their families of origin, but they wanted to heal from ISKCON. And the healing in the family, in the adult child of alcoholics sense comes of understanding the issue, acceptance, and forgiveness. They still don't want to be in ISKCON, but they forgive ISKCON. So it's a big movement. It's a big change for these women. So the Bhakti Recovery Group, you might have heard of Jiva, who runs this group. I started it with her in March of 2020. And there is, for example, down in Alachua, a men's meeting for sexual addiction. If you have a problem in your communities with this, which as I've heard, it's very common, pornography is an addiction. You can imagine, if I got told I have an addiction to pornography, and I know it's not good, and somebody says, you're just not chanting right, or enough. Imagine the shame. Imagine the feeling of loss, that I am not worthy, that you're feeling. But if we work together, the first step in recovery, regardless of the program, is we admitted we were powerless over our addiction and that our lives were unmanageable. The real important word is we. So if I want to stop myself from touching that hot stove, I have the support of people that'll tell me, Nancy, insanity is trying the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And you keep on trying to go to that touch stove, but I'm going to help you not to touch it. Well, it's the same thing that happens if indeed somebody has a pornography addiction, if somebody has food addiction, addiction to another person, which we call codependency, addiction to smoking weed, drinking, whatever. Groups of people together can help with that. So the Bhakti Recovery Group has a lot of online meetings, but they're also starting up many in-person meetings. So if you're interested in finding out about a men's meeting, I have the name of the person who started that down in Alachua, is willing, more than willing, happy for me to share that with you as contact information if you would like to do that. Also, you can go to the Wisdom of the Sages group and get into the Bhakti Recovery Group website there and ask for help from them. You can also always come to me. I'm always available to them. That's my dharma. My dharma's recovery. I know that. So, what other things? Oh, well, I think 2 years ago or last year, you had John Yasinjek, who was here, who gave a lecture, very dear friend of mine. He and I, along with about 9 other people in recovery, have created 20 to 25-minute videos on each of the 12 steps, plus some of the tools, that is going to be one of the Karuna Care series. It's being uploaded right now. John and I are going to do a podcast to try to advertise it, and it's going to be extremely cheap. But our hope is that people can look at the series of talks, not be fearful about 12-step meetings, and maybe actually go to a 12-step meeting. So, for example, I had the sponsee who was an ACA with BRG, and I said, you need to find adult children of alcoholics, and when I was through the BRG, I said to her, you need to go to an in-person meeting. And she said, I'm in Calcutta, there are no ACA meetings in Calcutta. I said, but what meetings are there? She said, well, there's an Al-Anon meeting. I said, Al-Anon has the same 12 steps. Go ahead, go to this Al-Anon meeting. Al-Anon is a program for families of alcoholics and drug addicts. And she came back, she said they were so kind, I felt like I had people to talk to. Okay. So the Karuna Care in-person 12-step meetings, And then I would just close with, the idea of compassionate listening. If a man came to you and said, I have this problem, I bet all of you would stop in your tracks and you'd listen, you'd look them in the eyes, and you'd talk to them about it. Please do that to the women too. They need to be heard, because often what happens is a lack of being able to be heard is our problem. When I was still drinking, I felt like I had a perpetual scream in my head. I didn't know what to do. And if people are hurting in your community, even if they've been abusive, they have hurt their families, their children, their wives, they need to be heard as well. So thank you so much.
So I'm just going to offer a minute of reflections on some of the things that I heard as far as solutions, and then open up the questions. So please be thinking, we've got about 15 minutes of time for questions. So I've observed that in ISKCON, sometimes there's a tendency, because we think we've got the highest revelation of God. We've got the most, as Prabhupada says, luminous scripture. We've got a wonderful culture. We've got fantastic food. The music is spiritual music, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We can't have these other problems. And if you say we have these other problems, then it means you don't believe we have the best philosophy, the best culture. No, it just means we understand through our philosophy and through our practical understanding, we are still embodied beings, and we face the same kind of challenges that anyone does in the world. So we have to learn to be honest and address these in a proactive way. Some of the solutions I heard, we need to first and foremost really deeply understand the teachings of Prabhupada, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and our own Vaishnava tradition. Otherwise, it's very easily be misled. Someone who's a little, we're understood, I should be humble, I should respect senior people. So some senior person makes a statement, and we assume, well, that must be authorized. Women are not supposed to do A, B, C, and D. Oh, he's been around for 30 years, he must know. Well, these ladies have been around for 50 years, and they also know, because they personally experienced what Prabhupada wanted. So know those teachings. Rukmini was pointing out, be a servant of our spouses, and we should be leaders. Praharana was saying, make sure that our leaders are doing things that strengthen ISKCON, including families, and making sure women are provided for. Engage women according to their propensity. Take care of our families as a serious effort. Make sure that there's women in leadership roles. They should not be denied those. Again, America's ahead of a lot of places, but we aren't necessarily doing this everywhere. And we should be very careful. Those of you that came recently, we know that in the disciple course there's an hour-and-a-half discussion about how even a guru can have problems. But what do you do when a guru has problems? We may think, well, he's someone, whatever it is, he or she is senior to me, and they came like a week before, so I can't question their behavior. Or I've been devotee a week longer than you have, so who are you to question my behavior? But it's the exact opposite of that. We're here, and we teach this as a seminar for gurus too, and there's a whole section on how you need to understand you are as vulnerable as anybody else is to the problems that sometimes overtake us. Maya is very strong. We have to be careful. We have to be transparent. And as they say, the Queen in DC, the expressions all over the place. If you see something, say something. So we have to kind of create that environment. That it's not that because someone is a senior person, or they're the president, or they're the guru, or they're the GDC, or they're a Prabhupada disciple, we can't call them, we can't expect them to follow the highest standards of culture, of Vaishnava culture, which includes protecting women and other vulnerable people. We're all vulnerable in our society. So just a couple of reflections on the comments you made. Questions? Yes. Do we have someone who can maybe run around the other microphone, or maybe, can somebody help over here? I don't know what Bhadra is. He's a technical support guy. Raj is there. There was one microphone on a wire.
Yeah,
You
you
can
have
actually
a
leave
switch.
that one here, and then we could take the wireless one and bring it around. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. First of all, thank you so much for a really wonderful and very moving presentation. I wanted to just ask the lady who spoke last, just
Nancy.
Nancy, yes. I just had a question about one of the comments you made, so I wanted to just understand more about it. You said that even if someone's been an abuser or has done something wrong, you said even they need to be heard. So you said also, even if someone's done something wrong and they've actually mistreated others, they also need to be heard. Can you just expand on that, just so we can understand more in terms of the point that you were making?
Yeah, the point is that if they're abusive, generally from my experience is because there's fear. That's the basis of a lot of abuse that comes about in fear of being found out, or fear of not being good enough. It's their own insecurities that are causing these problems. And if indeed they have been abusive, imagine the shame they feel. They know they're not supposed to be doing this, but they're not going to admit it unless there's an open dialogue about, listen, if things are going wrong, speak about it. And when you start to speak about it, especially in a group of other people that might be abusers, you start to realize that maybe there's a need to change. So there's a saying in recovery, if you have a drunken horse thief that stops drinking, if he doesn't change, what have you got? You got a horse thief, right? You don't have, he still needs to have to change. So if indeed somebody is an abuser, they need to change. And the 12 steps of recovery can help that, because we do a fearless moral inventory of ourselves. But it's very, very difficult if women are objectified. They become the sin, and the man can look at a woman as, you have enticed me, you are therefore the sin, and I'm going to mistreat you. There's so many dynamics there, but they need to be able to talk those things through with other people and get the counseling so that maybe they'll realize they need to change. Does that answer?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I guess just related to that, how do we understand that dynamic of what you shared in relation to the other side, which is that there needs to be some correction or protection because also the person has mistreated others. So, I want to understand.
Well, this would come over to, the other groups that would say maybe there would be consequences for this mistreatment so that another woman doesn't face the same mistreatment. But that really is up to the GBC and this organization to come up with those guidelines.
Thank you very much.
Leadership misconduct, office, domestic abuse.
I was listening to Rukmini when she was, I don't know whether it was the first or the second part of what you were saying, what Prabhupada said to you, I think in Montreal or somewhere, but I was thinking that why isn't those statements that Prabhupada made and enshrined and put in the Constitution it's Prabhupada's words, is anybody going to argue with that? There was something about, women can go out and open temples, they can do everything. Why isn't that enshrined? Why are people arguing with that?
Yeah, some of these things are so unknown. Govinda Dasi's writing her memoirs. She said that Prabhupada wrote, she was Prabhupada's secretary when I became a devotee in 1968. And she saw in Prabhupada's own handwriting on his desk, because she used to straighten up his desk. He wrote in his own handwriting that he wanted a couple of women on the GBC. Why? Because he said sometimes women themselves or children don't feel comfortable bringing their problems to a man, but they would feel more comfortable speaking up about their problems to a woman, women and children. So Prabhupada wrote that in his own handwriting. Who knows that? There's another story that there's a beautiful book if you'd like to read or share with your wife. It's called A Bond of Love, Srila Prabhupada and His Daughters. It's amazing stories that would, many of them shocking, really bring tears to your eyes. One story in that book that I want to mention is, because people always say, well, Prabhupada never put any women on the GBC, Prabhupada never had any women temple presidents. So in this book there's a story of a couple, the husband is American and the wife's Japanese, and they went to see Prabhupada in Los Angeles, and Prabhupada asked her, are you from Tokyo? And she said, yes. And he said, where are your parents? And she was really kind of in shock. She said, I don't have any parents. Her parents had deceased. And Prabhupada said, oh, you were brought by the stork? It was really funny. You were brought by the stork? You know, but then Prabhupada told them, he said, you should go back to Tokyo and your wife, he said to the husband, your wife should be the temple president in Tokyo. And they thought he was joking. You know, who knows this stuff? So there's so many things. I don't know if there's time. Should I share the story of Calcutta? Yeah? Okay, share another story that I love. This is first-hand story, someone who was personally there. The temple in Calcutta at this time is still on the same property, but it was very, very crowded at that time. I think, as I remember, you had to walk through the women's quarters to get to the bathroom. It was bad. No, I think it was, yeah. The men had to walk through the women's quarters to get to the bathroom, and it was bad, very crowded. So the men were out on the walk with Prabhupada one morning and just complaining to Srila Prabhupada that we got to get rid of these women. You know, it's very hard for us to be brahmacharis having to look at them. You know, that we got to get rid of them. They should get an apartment somewhere, you know. And that whole walk, Srila Prabhupada didn't say a word. They're all complaining, Srila Prabhupada, this is a big problem here, and blah, blah, blah. And he didn't say a word. So they get back to the temple. Meanwhile, the temple, the women were cleaning the temple, dressing the deities, cooking the breakfast, setting up the temple room for Prabhupada's lecture, doing everything basically, dressing the deities. And when they all came back from the walk, someone opened the door and they said, Jai Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada looked at the women, and then he looked back at the men, and he said, but if you associate with these women, you will go back to Godhead. And he just walked off into his quarters. That was it. You know, so there's so many varied stories. But, you know, I think it's probably a human tendency. We hear what we want to hear, right? So we have to weed out these problems. These are systemic, very unfortunate situations that our kids have suffered for. We lost a whole generation of people Sri Prahlad's age, you know, Gauravani's age. You know, it's tragic. So, yeah, more questions.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for not only diagnosing the problem, which is very painful to hear. It's like going and finding out you have cancer, but then also giving us solutions to how we can heal the society. I have a lot of female friends that I'd love to introduce to Krishna consciousness, but I'm afraid to send them to one of our temples because this isn't only past problems, and I feel like, I've got to give them a whole list of things that you might encounter this or this or this, so I'm curious from your perspective, because you must have many, many young women that are coming to you that you're actually shaping as young Vaishnavas. What advice do you give them, or do you have some kind of things that you tell them, you may experience this, but don't let it discourage you, or can you give us any advice on that issue?
Well, you know, I say to people, look for like-minded association, because in any group of people, you're going to have all kinds of people. You know, in the ISKCON society, there are going to be people that you can relate to, people you can't quite relate to, people that are really going to resonate with your heart. So use your discrimination, don't take it at face value. But the first thing I thought of when I heard your question was the former American President Ronald Reagan said, trust, but verify, right? So, you know, use your intelligence, don't turn off your brain. And I think we tend to be very idealistic. We come into spiritual community and we think these people are all saints and they all have my best interest at heart, but unfortunately that's not the case. But it's not just ISKCON, it's everywhere. You can go to the Catholic Church, you can go to the YMCA, you can go to the Boy Scouts, you know, it's everywhere. So you use your intelligence and find like-minded association that really resonates with your heart. We have, for women, we have an Urban Devi Sangha. The next one's coming up this Sunday, once a month. An online, conversation, different women lead it. It's international, and so there are resources. We have a women's retreat coming up in Washington, D.C. The title, you're an ex-Catholic, there's a beautiful title, The Wounded Healer.
Yeah, Henry Nouwen.
Henry Nouwen. So we're talking about being vulnerable for people's pain. And I think as devotees, we need to be vulnerable like that. We can't put ourselves on a pedestal that I know everything and I'm going to tell you. The real ticket is love of God has to be coupled with humility. Authentic prema, pure love of God, is always coupled with humility. Dainya and prema, those two go together. When you see pride, that's a sign that someone is not really experiencing true love of God. Someone wants to put things up on social media, blasting this, that, and everything. That's a sign. This is not someone I need in my life. You know? What do you say?
I mean, I think she's covered it, but I just want to mention that in every temple, you should cultivate a group of devotees who can welcome and nurture newcomers. We have a nice youth group in Toronto, and if I meet somebody who I feel would fit in with that group, I get them over there and they become friends. And it's much better than hanging out with me.
But the saddest thing is when someone comes to a temple and nobody speaks to them.
Yeah.
You know, the saddest thing, you can say, oh, have you been here before? Yeah, I was here once 6 years ago, but nobody talked to me. You know, Newton has this story. The inspector came when we were trying to open a restaurant in Denver, and so Newton said, oh, have you been here before? This was the man who was going to thumbs up or thumbs down whether we could have a restaurant in the temple, a buffet, not a restaurant, buffet. Okay, so Newton, have you been here before? He goes, yeah, I was here a few years ago and somebody called me a demon. You know, this is not help. So yeah, that welcoming, who are those welcoming devotees who can really personally connect with someone? You know, and I think there's someone in every temple. It may not be the person sweeping the floor, but those people are there in every temple.
Thank you again. Preface, I want to apologize to all the ladies, my wife included, and anybody in the movement for anything I may have done in the past.
No, you've always been
Well, anyway. But I have an elephant in my room, and that is Srila Prabhupada's statements. I was called to give a talk on Bhagavatam some days ago. And in the talk, in Prabhupada's purport, he quotes the Manusumhita about the verse that I forget the Sanskrit, but basically it goes, you should not become a father, a teacher, a guru, unless you can save your... And women should never be independent. When I studied for this class, I went to the Vanipedia and I searched on this, quote, women should not be independent. There was at least 40 places where Srila Prabhupada repeats this. To me, it's how do you deal with it? I mean, I was able to kind of nuance around it and say, well, this is all in the name of protection. That this is the meaning of this, not being independent, because he compares it to children, etc., is that it's meant for protection. But as you witnessed in the Praharana, especially has been speaking about, this particular thread has been used to go a completely different direction. And what do we do with that?
So I would say, first of all, we have to look at the present day context. You know, we hear that. Personally, when I'm sitting in a Bhagavatam class and I hear a speaker say, women need to be protected first from her father, then by her husband, then by her son. When I hear that, I look around the room. I think, okay, this woman, her father was an alcoholic. Her husband sexually abused her. Her son is a drug addict. What should she do? So sometimes it goes to what I did mention when I spoke, is that we have to become protected by our own saintly behavior. And that has to be coupled with saintly association. So sometimes when the rubber hits the road, that ideal is not there in the modern context. You know, where is the father? Sometimes the father himself was sexually abusing the daughter. I mean, I know one very nice Vaishnavi in ISKCON. Her own father, not even stepfather, was sexually abusing. So we have to look at this practically and look at solutions. So these types of groups are very, very helpful. Sex addiction, all these things are very, very...
Look, what do we do with these statements of Srila Prabhupada? This is Prabhupada's speech. It's in his purports, it's in his lectures, it's everywhere. And I raised the question with a member of the Vaishnava ministry, and this is going to be, because the topic here is what should we men do, right? And I was telling her that, you know, you should do something about this. You should publish some papers and so on. And now I'm going to say to myself and to all the men in this room, we're going to have to do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
We have to address these things. We're going to have to publish, work out, talk about it, discuss it, understand it, have classes. I don't know. Because the topic here is our role to protect women. And if we interpret this Manasamhita statement that says women should never be independent, and it is, I mean, that's exactly the words it says. Swara, no independence. If we interpret that means that, you know, they can't have leadership positions, they can't work, they can't do any of these things, we're going to have the opposite effect in modern society. But I think I'm just going to suggest that maybe it's time that men step up to this particular issue, take it by the horns, try to deal with it.
Men step up, but also I'd say sometimes the best protection for women becomes women themselves. You know, women like Nancy, women like Praharana, you know, women who can be like a real sister. Okay, you don't have a father, husband, or son who's there to protect you, but that association with like-minded women who can help them survive, you know, you have the ability to become whatever you want to be. Do it, you know, for Krishna. And I believe that Prabhupada was an innovator like that, you know.
Yeah, I just want to make one comment. I also struggle with this. Women have to be protected by their fathers, then their husbands, then their sons.
And they should never leave.
Yeah, so let's just do the first half. I think we forget we're supposed to be intelligent people, men and women. Let's ask ourselves, protected from what? Protected from deer that might, you know, hit them with the antlers? Or protect them because they can't drive cars? Protect them because, what are they being protected from? Let's be honest. From us. Women need to be protected from men. That's what that instruction. So it's not like you have to be protected and I'm so superior. No, you're the criminal, rascal male. We're the criminals. We're the ones that sexually abuse, physically abuse, emotionally abuse, like that. So let's understand the other half of the formula. Women have to be protected from us. Okay? So that's the first. So what are the practical ways of protecting it? Not necessarily say you have to be under the control of men who are likely to abuse you sexually, emotionally, physically, etc. So we need to make sure those folks that present that. And the other thing, just briefly, is a big topic. Are any of us supposed to be independent? Exactly. Where does it say Vaishnavas are supposed to be independent? We're supposed to be totally old men, Brahmins, right? We're supposed to be creating Brahmins. We're also supposed to be protected. You mentioned earlier, Praharana Guru, you're an old man, so they need to protect you. You know, and me, I'm pretty close. It requires some unpacking, you know, because I think when people will read that one half of the sentence and say, you have to be protected, therefore, I'm going to protect you by preventing you from doing service, by preventing you from having opportunities, by preventing you from being educated. That's not protection. That's exploitation. So I think that's the first response.
It's really bewildering, especially to women, these statements. It's scary and bewildering. But the way I see see it is that we're so far from the ideal. Like, if you had a husband who was a real pure devotee, like married to Bhaktivinoda Thakur or something, you'd probably be happy to take shelter. But we don't have anybody like this. We're dealing with a very imperfect world, and ISKCON, a very imperfect ISKCON. We don't have these skins of perfect Krishna consciousness men. So the women have to take care of themselves. That's the bottom line.
Now, this might be crazy, but should men be independent? Shouldn't we all be dependent upon Krishna and Radha?
Yeah.
So the fact that women shouldn't be independent, I think men should not be independent either. So, and also, things emerge and change. Krishna consciousness, we were talking about this earlier, the way we would look at Krishna consciousness 50 years ago versus today. Prabhupada was an innovator, and so I think that if a bunch of women, the three here, plus others, got together with him and say, hey, dude, this is a little severe what you're saying, because you don't understand how it's hurting me. I think that Prabhupada would, within his ability, make it clear what he meant, which is take care of women, women take care of men, all be taken care of by Krishna and Radha.
In one place, Prabhupada says a woman is a fortress for a man, right? And they've done studies. Men who are married are much happier than men who are not married. What? Older men. So, it's a partnership. We have to protect each other. And I think these are very real thoughts. But I also said that, protection means when you're in favor of something, when you cherish something, when you love something, you're pro. So protection doesn't mean like the mafia, where I'm gonna smash the window of your shop because you need my protection, right? You gotta pay me protection money. It's not like that.
Can we take 2 more questions? Is that okay? There's a lot of hands up there. But we also don't want to go too late.
Just one sentence I want to read from Prabhupada to respond to Guru. Prabhupada wrote, of course, when woman comes to Krishna consciousness, that position is different. He's talking about protection of women. We are speaking of ordinary women. So when we study things from a material point of view, these things are to be taken care of. But when man or woman becomes Krishna conscious, he or she takes care of herself or himself. Arjuna is speaking of ordinary women in the context of protection. So he said this, he's answered it, we just have to know where to look for it.
So I'm watching Raj for our timing, and I'm watching a lot of hands up out there. What should we do? There's 1, 2, more hands, there's 3, 4, there's 5 hands up. We really have
5 minutes.
Maybe we go another 6 minutes.
5, 6 minutes.
Let's do this. Sometimes you see it, they'll just say, ask all your questions one after another, and then we'll ask them to kind of answer them a bunch, okay? So just question. Quickly state your
Hare
question.
Krishna, thank you very much. Every time I hear a testimony like this, it goes deeper and deeper for me. What can we do? Two years ago, Venkata Prabhu gave a talk here at the Manchur retreat called Toxic Masculinity. And he identified ways within our culture that we still haven't addressed in which this masculinity comes through. So two things that we, and at our temples traditionally that happen that really stand out, that women are last, is when we pass around the key lamp, and then also when we chant the verses during class. And it gives this impression of, don't wait your turn, it'll get to you when we're all done. And I guess the question, so I came out of that seminar that Venkata Prabhu said. I said, okay, I want to do something about it. And I started talking about it at our local temple, and I just realized that not everybody was confused about it, so I let it go. But there was this idea, well, this is Prabhupada's standard. Was it Prabhupada's standard? Was that the way to be done? Or is this something that was brought in, manufactured? ask the
We're
question.
going to get all the questions and then they're going to answer it together as a bunch. Thank you.
Mine is not a question, so it's just an update.
You need to angle the microphone so they can hear you.
It's just an update. So first of all, I wanted to thank the organizer for, on behalf of Corona Care, that this is such a special and key panel. And 2 points of update. Corona Care is now an association, it's not an education. It's an association, it stands independently because everyone, including the leaders of ISKCON, may need Corona Care. So it's not within the organization. That's an important differentiation. And also, I see that Corona Care has introduced preventing child abuse as a course now. Preventing child abuse course in Corona Care.
Thank you. So we pass the mic down. There were 3 more hands up. Shrikant's been very patient.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Mine has 2 comments. One is, it's more a question. If you look at historical scriptures, like in Seva Kunj, Bhagwan Krishna puts flute on the feet of Radharani. And if you look at our Janvi Devi, she was the leader of our movement when Nityananda Prabhu died, passed away, disappeared. So I think a lot of our men, Indian men specifically, have a distorted view of the role of themselves and women in serving Krishna because of cultural baggage. So my long-winded question is, how do we help people understand what is scripture versus what's the cultural baggage distortion?
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Just from a position, unqualified, very new to the movement, I think it's a moment to innovate. If Prabhupada was addressing this, how would we innovate? So just one of the things is, why is not every class at a temple first started with, this is the mood and mode of Prabhupada towards equality. Every single thing before anything else is presented. So that's just for somebody new. Also, it's hard to believe that within the leadership of ISKCON, there are still people within powers of leadership and position that have not adopted the mood. So for me, if you genuinely want to make a difference or to have a significant change, you have to innovate, and that's radical. I don't know, that's what I just wanted to comment.
One more. Okay, 2 more. We're running that again. We have 2 more.
I also want to thank you all for the courage and vulnerability that you sit in front of us and share these beautiful stories and sad stories. I have not heard a lot of the stories presented here today. It crawls my skin, brought me to tears, and has me questioning why you're still here. I have also, and Bhakti Mark was influential in that. In terms of abuse, without getting personal in the details, I've brought cases of abuse to local authority or local people, and they are by higher authority to say this individual or these individuals have a past, and they are to not be reprimanded. So their behavior is just to be accepted. As a male, I can imagine hearing, well, that troubles me greatly. As a woman, that also, I can't imagine what that brings to the individual. The other thing is, I've tried bringing some of these issues discussed here today in the Sangha, and was brought to the side and 2-3 days later and suggested that these are things that are discussed for people off the street, not for people who are devotees. And I was shut down. And we were speaking to this about, when you're told you're less than, what that brings to you. I'm going to stop there.
Sure, last comment, question now, sure.
Hare Krishna. Thank you again, everyone. Rukmini, Guru, Praharana, Guru, Dr. Nancy, for sharing. And I think I did the last name.
Dr.
Nancy. I just want to provide a perspective. It's really unusual, and I'm an at-home dad now, and think the traditional perspective is that the women are home, they take care of the kids, the man goes out to work, and is the breadwinner. And it's been it's been unique. I think the first time it kind of happened out of just, I think I went to an at-home dad conference last year.
Just because of the timing.
Yeah, so I'll make it short, but it's really given me a different perspective of what it was like for women to stay at home, and the perception of a woman staying at home and the amount of work involved that it does to take care of the kids. And I think it's also interesting that I also feel hurt when people tell me that, oh, the roles are reversed, and I'm dad, like I'm supposed to take care of my kids. And I also see how my wife, in terms of equity, wage equity, that with her working and her not making as much as a man, it affects our whole family. And it's interesting just seeing how when you have women, the last thing I'll say is that even though I'm with the kids most of the time, when my wife comes home, the kids want to be with mom, and mom actually works like doubly hard to make up for her guilt for not being with the kids, and also to give me a break as an at-home dad. And so it's just been interesting to see that.
Thank you.
So we're just going to go down and address some of these questions and all that. So I want to take the first one on. Nobody gets a pass. Nobody gets a pass. Well, that's bogus, okay? In our society, nobody gets a pass. Just as an example, many of you may know, and hopefully you follow ISKCON News, it was not very many years ago when a sannyasi who practically everybody listened to whatever he said, whatever he did, it was Vedic, it was proper, shut up, don't bring any other questions up, don't question his behavior, was sexually abusing young people, okay? As the head, he was formerly the head of the Gurukul in our international headquarters. He was removed from that position because they couldn't really pin child abuse on him, but they pinned physical abuse. Nobody had any idea what was still going on, but it was. In large part because nobody raised the question, hey, why is he doing that? Why is he here? Why is he spending time with them? So we all, in a respectful way, we create an environment where leaders, and every one of us, integrity, accountability, transparency. Those three things have to be, and if you want to talk to me later about a particular situation of Praharana, please do so. But we have to make sure those things that happens in the material world, that's going to happen in our society, we shouldn't expect we aren't going to have problems, but how we deal with them, that's the important thing, okay?
I really think that the quote that Madan Gopal Prabhu read is really key. The Prabhupada says, I'm talking about ordinary women here. And when he has Vaishnavas, men and women should be taking care of themselves by their own saintly, sattvic behavior. So we have to understand Prabhupada's statements in context. And that's the problem when we take one out of context and we get all bent out of shape. That Prabhupada said this, what are we going to do with this? Take the whole thing in context, you know? And Prabhupada, yes, was an innovator, and we all come with cultural baggage, you know, whether, you know, I'm from the UK or the US, my dad was a drunk, or I'm from India, my dad used to beat my wife, and that was all fine. I mean, my dad used to beat my mother, and that was all fine in the village. No. You know, we have to act as Vaishnavas, as saintly behavior. And we have many women gurus in our bhakti tradition. Were they under the control of a brother, father, you know, they were women gurus, they were spiritual leaders, so take it all in context. That's important.
Just a short little thing that I've noticed over the years, you mentioned about Indian men in particular with distorted cultural views. There's a lot of that propaganda coming from India, and they are trying to infiltrate our temples and our devotees. They're trying to influence the way they think. They're trying to make people in North America think that they have the high road in India, that they know better, and that we're just sort of messed up with the Western loosey-goosey. So you really need to be aware of that. We don't want that here. And they will fall apart over there in time, because when I go to India, I see it's much more progressive than these people are pretending it is. That these women are not going to put up with this. They're not going to get new people. Nobody's going to marry these guys. And honestly, when you look at the second generation of young Indian-bodied people, they're like Canadians or Americans. They're like, they hear this stuff and they're like, huh? No way. So we've got some safety there. But yeah, please be aware and be aware of who might be vulnerable in your communities to this propaganda silliness that's trying to it's just power, control, prestige. It's the same. It's testosterone. I'm sorry, that's what it is.
Do you want to say something? I was just going to say, make sure you avail yourself of all of these tools, the Corona Care, the organization, what's the name?
Domestic abuse protocol.
Domestic abuse protocol, etc. You know, if you see somebody, a friend that's having problems, just speak up. You know, you can contact them independently, and you know, we need to be activists. We need to be thorns in people's sides sometimes, and it's important to do so. Thanks.
I just wanted to say, Srila Prabhupada went back to India in 1970, and there were these gigantic Pandal festivals of 25,000 people in Mumbai, Delhi, Calcutta. Prabhupada had Yamuna Devi, of course she was doing arti, she was leading the kirtans, and Himavati was speaking. Why did he do that? Why don't people see that? They think, oh no, this is India, you know? But that's what Prabhupada did. He wanted to basically blow their minds, you know? These women, as he wrote in the letter I read, these women are as good as their brothers for preaching Krishna consciousness. And Anitama Prabhu wanted me to address your question. I don't know, you know, what do? You're a temple president. Maybe you can alternate, you know? I mean, it's hard to run around with the ghee lamp, that's hard. But maybe with chanting the Sanskrit, maybe you could have a man chant, a woman chant. I think it's very nice in some temples. I think here they have the women offering flowers to Prabhupada, the men coming from one side. I mean, I've been in some ISKCON temples in India where, you know, every rickshawala in Delhi is offering flowers to Prabhupada before a single woman can get it anywhere near. No, that's not right. So I complained, and they did make a change, you know. But we have to be activists. We have to speak up. And if you speak up and you're not getting any response, go higher. You know, talk to someone else. Talk to Anutama Prabhu. He'll rattle the cage. He cares about this stuff, you know.
Just to wrap it up, or just a bit Shrikant's question. This panel and people that are thinking along these lines, this is not an advocacy for Western culture over Indian culture or American culture. We're talking Vaishnava culture, which is based on respect. It's not based on, you know, we all know, you know, the caste system is not a Vedic Vaishnava principle. To be engaged in Krishna service according to Villa, but, you know, hierarchy according to birth, according to gender, is a complete perversion. So we're talking about what are the Vaishnava principles, and I punch out this question. We have to look carefully what Prabhupada's teachings were and how he applied those teachings, and that becomes our example. So it's not a question, you know, East versus West. It's, you know, we're all coming from Kali Yuga. Whether we're born in India or in America or in North America, in Canada, whatever the states, we're all products of our environment. How do we adopt and understand Vaishnava culture? That's the real key thing that we're talking about here. So I want to thank Dr. Nancy Bhakti. Dr. Bhakti Nancy. Got a new term, thank you very much, Navigesha. And Praharana Devi Prabhu, and Rukmini Prabhu, and all of you for your questions and the time you took out. Let's give them a big round of applause. So for further research, the one book is of course, is the ISKCON Communications Journal. Madam Mohan's going to look up the particular article you look online. Madam Gopal, sorry. And the book, the bonds that.
Bonds of Love. Bonds of Love, Srila Prabhupada and his daughters. I believe you can get it on Amazon. Beautiful. And Madam Gopal Prabhu, please share that quote, because that's so important.
I put on change the org on the petition.
So it is now, we went a little later, but we have right now scheduled either or to go up a really special